Hey guys, it's Sam here, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is the SARMs. And much like my trend video the other day, this is one that I was keen to cover off as soon as possible because I feel like I get a disproportionate number of questions on this particular topic, and it's kind of something that concerns me. I think the interest in SARMs is disproportionate to how important they are, and I think there's quite a lot of things to be aware of. That people should be more aware of, for their own well-being and for their own overall understanding of bodybuilding. So I'm going to talk through the whole issue of SARMs today and list them all more comprehensively than you're going to find out elsewhere. But you'll have to excuse me for eating at the same time because at this size it's a constant mission, the eating, being 300 pounds and maintaining that now. And the eating, of course, is far more important than SARMs in the grand scheme of things. But basically what these things are is kind of research chemicals, like in the early stages, that are designed for an anabolic effect, which obviously is useful in medicine for when people have muscle wasting diseases, and recovery from burns, injuries, all that kind of thing. And they're being researched as alternatives to the traditional AAS because they're believed to be more targeted in their activity. In the same way that you have like aromatase inhibitors that are going to bring your estrogen down systemically versus SARMs, which are receptor modulators for estrogen, which would just be in a target thing. So it's a little bit like the difference between those two categories of medicines when you look at like SARMs versus AAS. So SARMs are not to be confused with SARMs. SARMs stands of course for selective androgen receptor modulator, while a SARM, and that stands for selective estrogen receptor modulator. So these SARMs products, they've become kind of popular and of interest in the last few years. I think I got asked about it the most around 5 or 6 years ago, but now that I'm putting more content out there and meeting more people, I'm getting more questions about them all over again, and disturbingly a lot of that's from kind of youngsters. And the reason people are interested in these is because they've heard bad things about steroids and looking for an alternative to boost their progress. Now that's understandable enough, we all want to make the best of our progress, but I think the problem with the picture of SARMs at the moment is a lot of the places out there on the internet that are giving the information on this stuff and writing the articles, they're completely biased because they're getting a kickback from the people selling these products on the internet, and the interest in them is basically because of their easier availability, and they're not subject to the same legal restrictions that AAS steroids are at this stage. And they don't, or almost all don't, involve needles and injections. And for those three reasons, they're kind of appealing to people more, particularly beginners. And I just want to kind of explain what the problems with that are and describe them a little bit and where we are in terms of SARMs, so that you can have that knowledge before thinking about anything else. And I say thinking because obviously you're not going to do anything off the back of this video. This is not to be construed as advice. This is just my thoughts as an analyst of everything that goes into bodybuilding and keeping a comprehensive channel going. And I'm going to kick off here with just listing them all because I haven't found a comprehensive list of them anywhere, but this is all of the different ones I can identify, and some of these may be familiar with to you already. So the most well-known one would be MK2866, also known as Ostarine or Enobosarm. And we've got LGD 4033, also known as Ligandrol. You've got S4, sometimes called Andarine. You've got RAD 140, sometimes known as Testolone. You've got YK11, and you've got S23. You've got AC 262536. You've got ACP 105. You've also got Magnalone, I believe that's an injectable Ligandrol, so LGD 4033, Magnalone. You've got LGD 2226 as well. You've got SR9009, sometimes known as Stenabolic. And then you've got GSK 2881078, GW 0742, GW 610742, and LGD 3303. Now, some of those you won't have heard of before. Some of them I had to do quite a lot of digging around and seem to have found them as distinct products, but it's very difficult to map all of this out because it's a complete grey market out there. It's a grey market situation because these things are being sold as research chemicals that are not for human use, but we all know full well that people are ingesting them to accelerate their progress with muscle gains, strength gains. So they're sold on that basis and they're not subject to legal restrictions properly yet. So it's a very similar situation to what we had going on with the so-called pro-hormones, like back in pro-hormones, the heyday of it was more sort of 14 to 16, 17 years ago, if I recall right. You know, these products where some of them were legit pro-hormones in the sense that they were precursors to chemicals that would then do what the intended effect was, but the actual thing you were taking had to be taken, converted in the body as a precursor to what then is driving results. So there were a few legit pro-hormones like that, but most of what was being marketed as pro-hormones were actually would be better described as designer steroids, and that what they were was products that had been derivatives of DHT and testosterone and so on and so forth. So they were in chemical structure still steroids, but they hadn't been classified by the law as steroids, like well-known things like stanozolol and oxandrolone, etc. They were simply things that had been left in the research, and then entrepreneurial and experimental people had gone back to such research and resurrected all the ones that had not been brought to market, and then brought them to market but called them pro-hormones, even though they're actually chemically sit within the family of androgenic anabolic steroids. And those products included things like M1T, methyl 1 testosterone, Superdrol, methasterone. Methasterone, of course, is like the generic name for Superdrol. There are other ones that were, I don't recall the chemical name of them, but basically things like Ferroplex and Epistane. Loads of them, but it's a very similar situation now with the SARMs, and I think once more research has taken place and more is known about them, we may discover that one or two of them are actually better described as steroids anyway, but are falling into that grey area because they're not listed in any of the laws as such. So that's what you got going on. That's what you got going on with the SARMs. It's a very similar picture to the pro-hormone situation like 15 or so years ago. Well, what does that mean for us? Well, most serious bodybuilders basically take the attitude that it's better the devil you know, because these things are research chemicals, and to my knowledge so far the only ones that have gone through human trials are the first two that I mentioned, namely Enobosarm, also known as Ostarine, and Ligandrol, LGD 4033. And those trials are promising, so these things do have an effect, but we don't have the long-term information on them in the same way that we've got decades and decades of research into things like testosterone, nandrolone, so on and so forth. So that's how it sits at the moment. So the first thing people want to know here is, do they work? And I'm not going to bullshit you and just say they're useless or write them off. They're promising. The research on Ostarine and Ligandrol is somewhat promising, and anecdotally I could say that maybe a standard dose of Ligandrol is about as effective in this kind of muscle building realm as, say, 400 milligrams of testosterone a week, which is effective for sure. But the real question is, are they good for you, or how not good for you are they? And that's a question that doesn't have a thorough answer or a thorough understanding yet, because we're not looking back at decades of research, as I was saying. So when you see the articles or information out there that says there's no side effects or no suppression and stuff, that's just basically wishful thinking, guesswork here and there, and moreover, most often, marketing, because there's people selling these things online that are offering like affiliate codes and discount links and this kind of thing, basically kickbacks to the people that are writing the information. And then that information you're reading is saying, oh, don't worry about this, like you might do with steroids, there won't be side effects. And that is not a known. We don't have enough information to say that kind of thing. So most serious people take the attitude that it's better the devil you know, and it doesn't seem that the serious bodybuilders that I know and have had the privilege of talking to use these things at all or rely on that. As I say, it's something that appeals more to beginners because they don't have a source like for anything else, whereas this stuff's in that grey area where it is widely available online, and they're not put off by other logistical difficulties around it, like needles and scary things like that, and they're not put off by the kind of taboo that surrounds AAS, because these things, they've made it into one or two news articles, but they're not widely known and frowned upon in society. So you combine all of that, and you have people very, very interested when they're, especially at the beginner level, and that's concerning because we just don't really know everything that we would want to know about these products. And because it's such a grey area online, we've got this problem that what you're being sold may not be what we even think it is. There's been a couple of studies into what these things actually are when they've sent them for third-party lab testing. That's products sold on the internet, and many of them have come back as actually steroids. So sometimes if you're reading like some kind of log or report on how amazingly punchy a particular research chemical or SARM was, it could be that the user had actually got what would be known as like real gear, and they think that's great because it's delivering the result, and they've never sent the product off for third-party testing because there's sort of fly-by-night companies like dealing with this sort of thing in that legal grey area, and that they don't thrive on building a reputation among like competitive bodybuilders, and that they thrive on pushing out loads of promising stuff or false promises around these things online. So it's something that I wanted to demystify and talk about a little bit in a very honest way. So I'm not going to sit here and say they don't work or that they're rubbish, because they are promising, and anecdotally we do have some positive feedback from people that have tried these things that have had third-party testing on their product, be it Ligandrol or whatever, but not enough is known about these things to be saying, this is what you should do, or this would be the route to accelerating things at this stage. Now moving on to the restrictions on these kind of things. Legally speaking, there's pretty much no restriction at the moment. It's a bit like the heyday of the so-called pro-hormones, as I was mentioning. In the future, I expect that if and when there's more bad press about youngsters buying these things on the internet and having problems, I suspect that laws will be made, and much like the process we went through with all of these designer steroid pro-hormones like M1T and all the rest. But at the moment, it's kind of just go with it in terms of the legalities. In terms of restrictions in sports, the World Anti-Doping Association, WADA, has listed a number of them in their publications. So if you didn't know, right, here we're getting into the real secret info that you're lucky I'm breaking it down like this for a video for free. But WADA every year publishes a list of prohibited substances, and in that they have a section now that lists a bunch of SARMs. What I can tell you is it doesn't list them all. So if a very a very interested person, you know, a very interested in boosting performance type person would pick up this video and list off all the ones that I reeled off at the start, or look at the video transcript and compare that to the current WADA list, you'd find some ones that they haven't even caught up with yet, because this SARMs research chemicals thing is running away with itself faster than most people, in WADA included, can keep track of. So it's something that's considered like doping, but it's something that obviously people interested in finding ways around all these things are always one step ahead, and I've just given you the route to seeing how many steps ahead they are when it comes to SARMs. But I expect that all of that will tighten up in the years to come as well. So that's where it kind of gets put the dampeners on it a little bit. But I do think that they'll be interesting to understand more about when these studies are finished, and as more of the newer ones are studied in humans at all, which I expect to unfold in the coming decades. But what I can say at the moment is in serious bodybuilding circles, they're not considered a replacement or even much of a tool used at all, and we wait and see what happens next. And that's my thoughts on SARMs. So if you have any questions about that, drop it in the comments. Any other requests on these sorts of matters, drop that in the comments as well. And if you like this kind of detailed, in-depth and comprehensive coverage of all things bodybuilding, make sure you subscribe. See you later.